My name is Ben Garrison, and if you'd asked me a year ago how my life was going, I'd have said, not bad. I'm a 38-year-old guy from Denver, Colorado, who thought he had it all figured out: a loving wife, a thriving real estate business, and a future we were building together, brick by brick. But that was before I uncovered the betrayal that turned my world upside down. This isn't just a divorce story, it's a raw, unfiltered tale of a toxic relationship, emotional abuse, and the courage it took to break free. It's about the night I stopped being the nice guy everyone walked over and unleashed what I call thermonuclear vengeance. Metaphorically speaking, of course. I'm not a criminal, just a man who learned the hard way that betrayal can either break you or make you stronger. I chose the latter, and I'm sharing this story because I know I'm not alone. Maybe my journey will spark a conversation we all need to have. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved because of their betrayal? Let's talk about it. Rachel and I met 10 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue in Boulder, Colorado, during a golden summer evening in 2015. I was 28, a scrappy real estate flipper who'd just closed my fifth deal, working late nights and weekends to build something from nothing. Rachel, on the other hand, was a 26-year-old marketing executive, sharp as a tack, with a smile that could light up the darkest room. We bonded over craft beers and a shared love for hiking in the Rockies. She just finished a trail I'd done the previous summer, and we spent hours swapping stories about our favorite spots. I was smitten by her confidence, her laugh, the way she could hold a conversation with anyone. By the end of the night, I knew I wanted to see her again. We dated for a year, moving fast, but feeling right. I proposed on a snowy morning at Estes Park, down on one knee in the middle of a frozen meadow, with the mountains as our witness. She said yes, her eyes sparkling with tears, and we got married 6 months later in a small mountain venue, surrounded by pine trees, our families, and our closest friends. We settled in Denver, buying a fixer-upper I'd flip myself, a two-story craft-style house with a wraparound porch, the kind of place you could imagine raising kids in. We dreamed of a family, of summer vacations at Flathead Lake in Montana, of growing old together. The first few years were golden. I'd spend my days negotiating deals, meeting contractors, and scouting new properties, while Rachel climbed the corporate ladder at her marketing firm, a mid-sized company downtown that worked with big-name clients. We'd come home to each other, cooking dinner together. Her famous lasagna was my weakness, layered with extra cheese and a secret spice mix she'd never share. On weekends, we'd binge true crime shows, sprawled on the couch with a bowl of popcorn, or take spontaneous drives into the mountains, just the two of us, and a playlist of 90s rock. We'd talk about the future: 2 kids, maybe 3, a dog named Max, a cabin by the lake where we'd escape the city noise. I thought we were solid, unbreakable. I loved her deeply, and I thought she felt the same. But around our 7th anniversary, I started noticing cracks. Rachel's late nights at the office became more frequent, her phone always buzzing with work texts she'd angle away from me. She started wearing new perfume, something floral and expensive, and her wardrobe shifted: sharper heels, tighter dresses, like she was dressing for someone else. I'd catch her staring off into space, her mind somewhere I couldn't reach. I asked her once, late at night as we lay in bed, if everything was okay. She smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "Of course, Ben. Just work stress." I wanted to believe her. I did believe her, because I trusted her, because I loved her. But deep down, a quiet voice whispered that something was wrong. Looking back, I see it now. I was ignoring a toxic relationship, clinging to the hope that trust could fix what was already breaking. The signs kept piling up, small but sharp. She'd come home smelling faintly of whiskey, claiming it was from a client dinner. Her phone lock code changed, then her laptop password. She opened a second bank account I didn't know about, saying it was for work expenses. I brushed it off. Her job was demanding, with long hours and high stakes, and I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who couldn't handle her success. But the silence between us grew heavier, like a storm cloud you can feel before it breaks. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was losing her or if I'd already lost her. It was a crisp November evening in 2024, and we were at a corporate gala in downtown Denver, the kind of event Rachel lived for: glitz, champagne, and social climbing. I wasn't a fan of these black tie affairs, with their forced smiles and shallow small talk, but I went for her, dusting off a suit I hadn't worn since our wedding. The ballroom at the Four Seasons was packed, the air thick with laughter, clinking glasses, and the hum of networking. Rachel was radiant in a sleek black dress that hugged her curves, working the room like a seasoned pro, her laughter echoing as she charmed clients and colleagues. I played the supportive husband, sipping whiskey and nodding through conversations about market trends and golf handicaps, counting the minutes until we could leave. Then her boss, Greg, approached me. He was mid-30s, cocky, with a grin that screamed trouble, a man who carried himself like he owned the room and everyone in it. He clinked his glass against mine, the sound sharp in my ears, and leaned in close, his breath warm with bourbon. "Congratulations, Ben," he said, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "You're going to be a father. I knocked up your wife." The words hit like a freight train, knocking the air out of me. My glass froze halfway to my mouth, my mind scrambling to process what I just heard. I thought I'd misheard him, that it was some twisted joke, a drunken slip-up. I turned to Rachel, who was standing a few feet away, expecting her to laugh it off, to say it was a misunderstanding, even an awkward prank. But instead, she smirked, a smug, cold look I'd started seeing more often over the past 6 months, a look that made my stomach churn. "Yeah," she said, her voice steady, almost triumphant, "and you won't even divorce me. We have a no-fault dissolution of marriage. Betrayal doesn't hit like a slap. It seeps in slow and steady, like a leak in your foundation you don't notice, until the house starts to tilt." I stood there, the noise of the gala fading into a dull hum, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't react right away, not because I wasn't stunned, but because I couldn't believe this was real. I'd suspected something for months, but this was a public execution of our marriage, a calculated humiliation in front of a room full of strangers. I smiled, a tight, forced smile, nodded once, and stepped away, my mind racing with a mix of rage, shame, and clarity. I walked to the valet stand, not to leave, but to retrieve something from the glove box of my truck, an envelope I'd been holding onto for weeks, a contingency plan I'd hoped I'd never need. I'd had suspicions for months, but I didn't want to believe them. It started small. Rachel changing her phone lock code, claiming she'd forgotten the old one. Then her laptop password changed, and she brushed it off as a security thing. She opened a second bank account I didn't know about, saying it was for work expenses. She didn't want to mix with our joint finances. I tried to talk to her about it one evening, sitting at our kitchen table with a glass of wine, but she waved me off, her tone sharp. "Ben, stop being so paranoid," she snapped. "I'm not your employee. I don't need to report every little thing to you." Her words stung, but I let it go. I didn't want to be that guy, the insecure husband who couldn't handle his wife's success. But the red flags kept piling up, each one a little harder to ignore. She'd come home late, her hair slightly mussed, smelling faintly of whiskey and that new perfume I didn't recognize. She'd laugh off my questions, saying it was just a client dinner, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. I'd hear her whispering on the phone in the bathroom, her voice low and secretive, and when I'd ask who it was, she'd say, "Just a coworker, Ben. God, give me some space." I started losing sleep, lying awake at night while she slept beside me, wondering if I was going crazy or if I was right to be worried. That's when I shifted gears. I'm a details guy. It's how I built my real estate business from scratch, flipping houses in a market where one wrong move could tank you. I learned early on to pay attention, to read between the lines, to map out every exit before I even stepped into a deal. So I started digging, quietly, methodically. I made copies of everything I could access: emails, receipts, digital backups from our shared iCloud account she hadn't bothered to disconnect. I installed a tracker app on a tablet she'd forgotten to log out of, watching her movements. Late night drives to hotels, work trips that didn't match her calendar. I studied the shift in her wardrobe, from professional blazers to provocative dresses like she was dressing for someone else. I found hotel receipts on a corporate card, still in my name, tucked away in her purse, and my suspicions turned into a cold, hard certainty. Rachel thought I was the predictable husband, the guy who wore flannel on weekends, fixed garbage disposals, and never asked too many questions. She didn't see the man I used to be, the one who'd grown up watching my dad leave for work at 4 a.m., coming home with calloused hands and a quiet dignity that taught me resilience. She didn't see the man who'd built a business from nothing, who knew how to move silently when someone crossed me. By the time she and Greg started their affair behind my back, I'd already mapped the exits. I pre-filed for divorce 2 weeks before the gala, hiring a top-notch attorney who specialized in asset protection and reputational damage. Our prenup had an infidelity clause nullifying spousal support. Rachel hadn't read it carefully when we signed it, but I had. And the house? It was in my name, a flip I'd done back when the market was hot, and I'd never transferred the title. A blessing in disguise. Back at the gala, I returned to the ballroom, the envelope heavy in my hand. The music had shifted to something slow and jazzy, the kind of tune that made people sway on the dance floor, oblivious to the storm brewing in my chest. People laughed, sipped their wine, networked like nothing had happened. I spotted Rachel and Greg by the bar, still standing close, sipping their drinks, like they hadn't just dropped a bomb on my life. Rachel's smile faded when she saw me, her eyes locking onto mine with a flicker of fear. "Ben," she said, her voice cracking, "don't do this. Please." Greg turned, his grin faltering for the first time that night, but he still had that cocky edge, like he thought he could talk his way out of anything. Rachel didn't know what I had in my hand, not yet, but she knew the look on my face, the look of a man who'd been pushed too far, a man with nothing left to lose. I decided in that moment, walking back from the valet stand, that I was done playing the nice guy. I was done eating betrayal with a forced smile, done letting people walk over me because I loved them. I walked to the bar, my steps deliberate, and dropped the thick, plain envelope next to Rachel's cocktail. I said one word, my voice low and steady. "Read." She hesitated, her fingers trembling as she reached for the envelope. Greg, puffed up on vodka and arrogance, snorted, leaning over her shoulder. "What the hell is this, Ben?" he asked, his tone mocking, like he was still in control. I looked him dead in the eye, my gaze unflinching. "Your resignation letter?" I said, my voice cold enough to cut through the warm buzz of the room. Rachel unfolded the papers, her hands shaking now. And as her eyes scanned the first page, all the color drained from her face. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed, then opened again, like a fish gasping for air. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the gala. "Proof," I said, my tone even, almost clinical, "of the affair, of the misuse of company resources, of the little games you've both been playing while I've been footing the bills and doing your laundry." Greg's face turned a shade of red I'd only seen on construction warning signs, his bravado cracking. "How did you—" he started, but I cut him off. "You really shouldn't let your side piece keep a shared iCloud account with her husband," I said. "Rookie move!" A few guests nearby gasped, their conversations halting as they turned to watch. Someone dropped a glass, the shatter echoing through the room. The band stopped playing mid-note, the silence heavy, suffocating. Even the bartender froze, his rag hovering over a glass he'd been polishing. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. On cue, a video began playing on the ballroom's mounted projectors. I'd uploaded it remotely earlier that evening after bribing the event tech guy with $200 and a promise to owe him a favor. It was worth every penny. The video started with a screen recording, a slideshow of text messages between Rachel and Greg, their words dripping with flirtation, with plans. Then came the hotel check-ins, Rachel in lingerie, Greg shirtless and grinning like a frat boy, all time-stamped, all damning. The room was silent now, every eye on the screen, on the undeniable proof of their betrayal. I stood in front of the screen, the video playing behind me, my voice steady as I spoke. Consider this my resignation, I said, loud enough for the room to hear. From this marriage, from this charade, from ever being someone's doormat again. I slid my wedding ring off my finger and placed it on the bar next to Rachel's cocktail, the metal clinking softly against the glass. Greg scrambled to shut off the projector, his hands fumbling with the remote, but it was too late. The damage was done. I turned and walked out, the cold November air hitting my face as I stepped into the Denver night, my heart surprisingly steady, a strange calm settling over me. The next day, I moved all our shared funds into an escrow account, pending court approval, my attorney guiding me through every step. I anonymously contacted their company's HR department, dropping the documentation I'd gathered. Greg was Rachel's supervisor, and their affair was a clear violation of company policy. 2 days later, HR launched a formal review, and whispers of a leadership restructuring started circulating. Rachel showed up at the house that afternoon, banging on the door like the SWAT team was inside. I opened it just enough to let my words out, my voice calm but firm. "You don't live here anymore," I said. Her mascara was running, her eyes red, but I felt no sympathy. "They're suspending Greg pending investigation," she said, her voice breaking. "You don't know what this is doing to me." I almost laughed, the irony too sharp to ignore. "Seems like a fair trade," I replied. "You gave him a baby, I gave him a probation review." Rachel's social circle, the one she'd curated so carefully, built on brunches, charity galas, and Instagram perfection, turned on her overnight. Her pregnancy announcement leaked alongside Greg's name, complete with work emails and timestamps, the digital trail doing the rest. Her Instagram went private within a day. Greg's profile disappeared entirely. Their company issued a bland leadership restructuring memo, but the damage was done. I hadn't lied, hadn't embellished. I just released the facts, and the truth took care of the rest. I needed space, a reset. So I rented a cabin near Flathead Lake in Montana, a place I hadn't visited since college. I packed light, books, fishing gear, and a bottle of bourbon I'd been saving since my 35th birthday, a gift from my dad before he passed. The cabin was small, rustic, with a view of the lake that stretched out like a mirror under the winter sky. I spent my days fishing, reading, and chopping wood, the physical labor grounding me in a way I hadn't expected. I thought I'd be angry, replaying that night at the Gala over and over. But instead, I felt free. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of Rachel's expectations, her lies, her betrayal. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, a truck pulled up the gravel drive. I set my bourbon down, squinting as the dust settled, and out stepped an old friend I hadn't seen in years, Eli Mason. He looked just like I remembered, scruffy, broad-shouldered, with a permanent smirk, like he knew the punchline to every joke. He gave a casual wave. "Well, damn," he said, his voice warm with amusement. "You went full off-grid lumberjack." "Eli," I said, blinking in surprise, "what are you doing here?" He held up a postcard I'd sent him a week earlier, a half-joking note about trading Wi-Fi for firewood. "Thought it was a cry for help disguised as a vacation update," he said, grinning. I laughed, the sound foreign but welcome, and invited him in. We spent the evening on the porch, two guys in flannel sipping bourbon, talking like no time had passed. Eli worked in corporate law down in Denver, but we'd stayed in loose touch, holiday texts, the occasional meme. He'd heard about the Gala through mutual friends and decided to check on me, not with a call, but with a 10-hour drive. "You really detonated that one," he said between sips, his eyes glinting with pride. Public exposure, HR sabotage, a data trail, everything but the theme music. I shook my head, a small smile tugging at my lips. I don't have a dark side, Eli, I said. I just stopped pretending not to see what was right in front of me. He stayed for a few days, cooking better than I ever could, playing chess like a psychopath, and reminding me of who I used to be before the marriage consumed me. A man who built things, who didn't let others tear him down. One night, as we sat by the fire, Eli said something that stuck with me. You know what your problem was? He asked, his tone serious now. You kept trying to build a life with someone who was busy building a ladder out of you. The words hit hard, a truth I hadn't fully articulated. I'd built the house, the foundation, the structure of our life together. But Rachel had been measuring windows for a penthouse somewhere else, with someone else. Our marriage wasn't just broken, it had been built with different blueprints altogether. 3 weeks later, I returned to Denver, clean shaven, with a clearer head and a renewed sense of purpose. The house was still mine, the divorce proceedings moving smoothly. Rachel sent a letter, no fluff, just a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. I made my choices. You made yours. I'm sorry it ended this way. I don't expect forgiveness, just finality. I read it twice, then once more, searching for the woman I'd married in those words. I didn't find her. I didn't reply. Some endings don't need punctuation. I threw myself back into work, sharper and more focused than I'd been in years. Real estate welcomed me back like an old friend, and deals started moving again. Listings up, closings steady. Betrayal has a strange side effect. It makes your vision crystal clear, like wiping fog off a windshield. I started running again, something I hadn't done since my early 30s. The rhythm of my feet on the pavement, a kind of therapy. I even ran into an old high school friend, Tara Kelly, at a development project I was bidding on. She ran a small architecture firm now, and as it happened, we were both eyeing the same property. A commercial lot downtown with potential for a mixed-use build. Ben Garrison, she said, laughing as she spotted me across the site. I thought you'd moved to Alaska or something. Close, I said, grinning. Montana. Temporary exile. She looked me over, her head tilted. You look different, she said. Lighter, maybe. Got divorced, I said plainly, and her eyes softened with understanding. Ah, that explains the lack of soul-crushing tension lines around your eyes. I laughed, the sound genuine, and we caught up over coffee at a nearby cafe. Tara had been through a divorce too, a couple of years earlier. No cheating, just a slow unraveling of two people who'd grown apart. We shared stories, swapped lessons, and laughed more than I expected. You know, she said as we walked back to our cars, people always talk about starting over like it's this sad, lonely thing. But honestly, it's kind of refreshing, like gutting a house to the studs. Clears out the rot, I said, nodding. She smiled, handed me her card, and said, let me know if you ever want help designing something new. I wasn't jumping into anything. I wasn't chasing a rebound story arc. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like the road ahead wasn't just mine. It was open, full of possibilities I hadn't let myself imagine. I started a blog, something I'd never thought I'd do, sharing pieces of my story anonymously under the title From Doormat to Defiant. The comments poured in, men and women saying, I've been there, or you gave me the courage to leave. I wasn't alone, and that changed everything. This isn't just my divorce story, it's a mirror for anyone who's faced a toxic relationship and wondered if they could break free. I read once that one in 3 men in the US experiences some form of emotional abuse in a partnership, often hidden behind closed doors, masked by shame or societal expectations of what a man should endure. It's a statistic that makes me pause, that makes me wonder, why do we stay? What keeps us tethered to people who hurt us? And what would happen if we all spoke up, if we shared our truths without fear of judgment? So I'm turning this to you. Have you ever had to walk away from betrayal, from a toxic relationship that drained you? What gave you the courage to break free, or what's holding you back? Maybe you've experienced emotional abuse, the kind that's subtle but cuts deep, like I did. Share your story in the comments. I'm here for you, and I want to hear it. Let's talk about the pain, the revenge, and the healing, because the more we speak out, the less power those things have over us. I'm Ben, and this is my truth. What's yours?